Hey, it's good to see you. It's good to
Good
meet
to see
you.
you. Good to me. I can show you. I don't know if you can look out my window here, but you can see the snow, right?
I can't move mine because it's mounted, but we actually got some snow here in Tennessee.
Whoa. Yeah.
Yeah,
All right.
yeah. It's I think it's this morning when I was up, it was -6
Ah, that's cold.
Fahrenheit.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
pretty cold, man.
yeah.
Pretty cold.
Cool.
Yeah.
But how are you doing? How's the new year for you? And are you happy? And
Oh man, it's been very busy.
yeah.
In a good way. I like to stay busy. My wife has some medical problems. She's had some medical problems for a while,
Okay.
but I'm grateful that I'm in a position to where I can take care of the kids and help her
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
so it's a blessing in disguise, it's a good reminder of that I've got it good. Um
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
so yeah, the podcast, we're just building up a lot of content for it, having awesome people like yourself talking about some of the things that we're going to talk about today, and very excited to
Yeah.
share that. And then we have
Yeah. Yeah.
some other cool stuff going on, a platform coming out targeted at influencers and content creators to give
Yeah.
them a deeper connection and relationship with their fans.
Yeah.
So yeah, like it's awesome. It's awesome. Yeah. What about for you? How's your New Year been so far?
It's been very good. I came back from South Africa 2 days ago.
Oh
So
wow.
I was in Cape Town and to see friends, to make new friends, to surf, and to enjoy the nice weather. Because Cape Town is like it's the opposite of Denmark. So it's their summer right now. So
That's
but
crazy. So you were escaping some of the cold
yeah,
for a little bit?
totally, yeah. But I
Yeah.
mean, nice to be down there, and also kind of, I went to a few shows, like keeping up with the scene down there. There's a lot of electronic music, the Afrobeat scene, and I'm a piano scene, and I met a very cool artist called Msaki, and became friends with her. She's actually like a folk singer, but she's doing a lot of collaborations. And she made a track with Diplo. She just
No
performed
way.
recently in Madison Square Garden together with Black Coffee, which is like the big DJ there down there. I
Wow.
went I went out to the township where they have this school for kids, like for electronic music, and Black Coffee was attending that school, and now he's one of the biggest DJs in the world, and so on. So I really love that kind of digging into the stories and meeting people. And also, like 5 years ago, I released an album, and actually on that album, I went to South Africa and I recorded with a few people there. So yeah, so you make friends, and the music world is small in that sense. So it was really nice to be there.
That is awesome, man. And I love just hearing. I mean, I love that you talk about South Africa and just some of the history there, because there's Africa as a whole has been a part of so much music that a lot of people
Yeah,
don't know. They
yeah,
don't know
yeah,
that like the original Lion Track soundtrack
yeah,
was
yeah,
was made in Africa, and
yeah,
in the story behind that and how that was made, like where they're
yeah,
using a studio for a mob boss who embezzled money, but that was the only studio they could get into, and
yeah, yeah, yeah,
like just crazy things, and it's
yeah,
it's it's a
yeah,
really awesome
yeah.
story. Yeah, yeah.
I I had a very good friend, Shoni. Last time I was in South Africa was in 2019, before COVID. And unfortunately, during COVID, my friend Shoni got COVID and passed away. He
Hmm.
was 37 years old, and he was an amazing person and a super good connector and so on. And he told me a story. Actually, he started when he was very young, working with like social media and so on. And he lived in a village, and every day he had to walk for hours to get into town, to get to an internet cafe to work with social media, because he didn't have any devices, anything like that.
Right.
And I'm doing this through the last 13 years. I've been running an education for music culture and music entrepreneurs in Denmark, a combination of both musicians and music industry people. And I remember like once he was in Denmark, and he was kind of, he made a lecture for the kids or for the young people. And just that point, if they're like, oh, it's hard, how do I get followers and stuff like that? Suddenly we hear about someone that's been like he walks several hours a day to actually just get online, right? So it's also, to get a perspective. Africa, many African countries are super advanced, and like they were actually early when it came to something like Venmo. In Denmark, we call it mobile pay. In the US, it's like Venmo or PayPal or something like that. In Africa, very early, they had this payment system made of like SMS based. So it wasn't like really online, but already then, like, they were super advanced. So we
Yeah.
just think that, like the third world countries and so on, there's a lot of cool stuff happening down there. And I could say the music scene, I think especially after the Black Panther movie came out with that soundtrack made by this Swedish guy,
That's,
stuff like that, the
yeah,
music
yeah.
became big, and a lot of, especially like urban hip hop artists, they picked up on the stuff now, and now also the dance world, electro music with the Afro beats, and it's something, it makes people move. So I'm super excited about Africa in general.
Dude, it's so cool that you share that too. So you obviously have relationships all over the world. Now are these people that you generally keep up with like through social media, or how are you building these
Mm.
relationships? Because obviously it's not always, oh, they're just down the street from you and you
Yeah,
see
yeah,
each other at a
yeah,
local pub or
yeah,
something, right?
yeah. I definitely have friends, and now I'm single, but ex-girlfriends that been saying, "Oh, you're too much on your phone. You're too connected in a way." And like, I think we all struggling with that. Like, yeah, go to dinner, leave the phone at home and stuff like that. When that said, definitely technology is helping me keep up with these relations.
Mm,
Like, especially like right now, I always feel that we sit in the same room, right? That we have these possibilities, and something I did also during COVID, when I collaborated close with Dylan Barry, from LA, was that before that we did a lot with Nordic LA, the company in we had in or we still have in LA. We did a lot of like writing camps, like physical writing camps in like the Capitol Records building, in different
yeah.
studios with the musicians and writers from the Nordics, but also of course with the producers and writers from the US. And when COVID hit, we were like, what to do? And actually, we said, no, this we should continue to create good music. So we did a lot of online writing camps, and suddenly we had people in the room from South Africa, from Germany, from Denmark, from Sweden, from. So suddenly we had a much more diverse team of writers, and I think actually some of the stuff we did during that period was amazing. And of course, when it comes to writers and producers, we all have our own like quirks and ways to do stuff. But
Yeah.
most of people, they lean into it. They said, I can still be part of writing a great song, but I can be in my like safe environment. I don't have to, fly across the world, and like
Yeah.
in terms of the environment and so on. So there was actually a lot of good things about like this online way of creating together.
So, so for you, you've used social media and things like that to
Mm,
build these relationships. So it's been very positive. But I know you have Nordic LA, then you
yeah,
have your band Nephew, right?
yeah, yeah,
Right.
yeah,
Um, and so those are positive sides, but have you
yeah.
seen like some of the through this experience, have you seen some of the drawbacks or negatives as well?
Mm,
Through this
mm.
process? You even said ex-girlfriends, right? Saying you're on
Yeah,
your phone too much. Do
yeah,
you
yeah.
see
Mm, mm,
anything? And I'm genuinely asking, right? Do you
mm,
think they were right, or do you think it was
mm.
just they didn't understand you? Right? Just
Yeah,
like I play video
mm,
games, and my wife
yeah,
plays video games,
yeah,
so she understands
yeah.
what it means to be online, and that it's not
Yes,
even just a
yes.
distraction, but it's a sense of community,
I get it.
oftentimes.
Actually, to elaborate on that a bit, just about my setup, like when COVID hit, I moved back to Copenhagen, where I am now. Um, I still go to LA as often as possible, but our main activities is around what we do in Denmark, and then also like collaborations with people in South Africa. I also recently went to Bhutan for 4 weeks. Bhutan is this tiny country that's squeezed in between India and China.
Hmm.
So um, yeah, I befriended the king of Bhutan. He's a great guy, and his wife, the queen, and so on. And when you go to Bhutan, Bhutan is a mythical place, and it's a place where you meet a lot of monks. There's a lot of monks
Mm.
there, and suddenly you see a monk with a cell phone, a mobile phone, and you're like, oh, that's wrong. A monk should, I don't know, like walk with a stick or something like that.
Right, right, right. We have this idea from the movies
Yes,
of what a
yes,
monk is.
yes. But of course, we see a global movement towards technology, social media platforms, and so on. And of course, like what you talk about, it's a hard balance. But I think accessibility is something that we should all have. Like the people that don't have the technology, they are left behind. So technology is important. And I'm not a romantic, like saying the old days are better. Not at all. I love technology. I love leaning into it. I love that I can, instead of gathering my whole band, like people have families, and I can make
Yeah.
music on my desk, my laptop here.
I actually love
Um,
I love when people go, the old days were better. I love it because it opens up a door and I go, "Do you drive a car?"
yeah,
And they
yeah,
go, "Yeah, of course." And
yeah,
I go, "But what about horses?"
yeah, yeah.
Because those were the old days. And
Exactly.
someone might argue that you were more one with nature.
Yeah,
But the
yeah.
reality is that
Mm,
we're
mm,
not really looking
mm.
for being more one with nature. We're looking for
Mm.
being able to achieve more of what we want in life.
Yeah,
We want to
yeah,
use a car to get somewhere faster, right?
yeah,
And we want to
yeah.
use a phone to communicate quicker, more directly, more conveniently, right? We're on Zoom right
Exactly.
now. This would have never
Mm.
happened.
No,
You and I
no,
would have
no.
never met,
Mm,
right? If we
mm.
didn't
Yeah.
have the ability to have that connection online, right?
No, I totally agree. And when that's said, I think it's about also building a mindset about like how do we like new technology also, of course, with the AI and so on. Of course, we have to be, we have to think about how do we handle that in everyday lives, like in our everyday lives. How do we deal with some of the options and possibilities, like let's say if, fake news, for example, that now you can generate someone's voice, like maybe the U.S. president, that are saying really stupid things. And if you don't have that sense of like, okay, is it actually the truth I'm listening to? Then it is a problem. So yeah, of course we have to deal with that. Also, like you saying that like you have kids. Of course, it's also a way of helping kids to say, okay, now you can use your phone, you can play video games, but it's also important that you go out in the garden, or you meet your friends and so on. But
It's
I
such a
don't
tough
think
balance.
it is. Yeah,
You
yeah,
know, one of the people who opened my eyes to that, I have kids, young kids, and one of
yeah,
the people who opened my eyes to it because I would listen to everyone saying, keep them away from screens, keep them off their phones, keep them away from all this stuff.
mm,
And initially I agreed, but I didn't know why. I just agreed because I
yeah,
heard
yeah,
it.
yeah,
Then Gary V, of all people, said
mm,
one of the worst things you could ever do for your kids is take away their connection to technology because
mm,
he said whether you like it or not, that is their future. They're not going to live in
yeah,
some post-apocalyptic world
mm,
where gardeners and are the most coveted skill trait. It's people who
yeah,
know how to use technology. And
yeah,
and if they don't know how to be even
mm,
average at
mm,
technology, they can't get an average job. They
mm,
can't fit in with an average person because
mm,
they're so disconnected. And so
mm,
it's hard because there are studies that show that there might be some harmful effects with too much
mm,
screen time.
mm,
But
mm,
then the other part of it is like in a world that is increasingly on the screen,
mm,
how do you, like for me,
mm, mm,
almost 90% of my job every day is on a
mm,
screen.
yeah,
And then
yeah,
you're telling me where most of my enjoyment, as far as like
yeah,
video games, TV shows, stuff like that,
yeah, mm,
that's on a screen. I can't,
yeah,
it's not like I
yeah,
can turn around and go draw it out in the snow,
mm,
right?
yeah,
It is where it is. Now I'm
yeah,
not talking about
yeah,
hanging out with my kids. When I'm hanging out with my
mm,
kids, I try to just play with them. We'll play with toys and build
yeah,
forts and go do
physical
those
objects
things.
and
But
so on.
listen,
Yeah,
first of all, you can't play for 6 hours in a day.
Yeah. No,
They're
no.
going to get tired. You're going to get tired,
Yeah,
right? Or
yeah,
for instance, the snow. They go, oh, go out and play outside. Sure, I'll take
yeah,
them out for what, 30 minutes, an
yeah,
hour? They're going to get
yeah.
so cold. And so then
Yeah.
what do you do? And so there's
Yeah.
this it's really hard.
Yeah. No, I totally get you, and I think now I'm not a parent, but I think it's also, actually having a dialogue with your kids and saying, yeah, let's now we play in the snow. Now you have half an hour on the screen or whatever. And I think in general that we should of course support like especially kids and people that don't have like, they're not in a situation where they can reflect over like the effects of what you do with on a screen, so to speak. But I also think, like you say, on the screen, you can suddenly connect with people that you haven't connected with. I think it's a hard balance when I hear from my friends, of course, that there are kids on Snapchat like constantly, and suddenly, you stay in the kitchen, and suddenly someone is like filming, not on purpose, and you're like, hey, we have to talk about this.
Right.
So I think it's very much about a dialogue, like putting some rules or some guidelines about how to do it. But yes, this is part of
It's
who we
yeah, I feel
are,
like
and
that's
yeah,
everything. As a parent, it's like
yeah,
you have to teach your kids this level of appropriateness
yeah.
with the
It's
tools
a
that they
balance.
have. You have to
Mm,
teach them
mm,
about driving responsibly and drinking responsibly and
yeah,
relationships
yeah.
and what's so funny is I think we've seen such a lack of that over the years. And I think that's where we have a lot of problems, right? Social media is really,
Mm,
really bad. And while
yeah,
I'm very transparent about this, part of why I have this podcast, Digital
yeah,
Dilemmas,
mm,
is that
mm,
I believe that, well, I don't have to believe it. The facts are out there. The big
yeah,
social media companies are awful. They're very
yeah,
terrible people, and they know
yeah,
that they
mm,
do things to hurt people.
yeah,
They've been caught 1,000 times over.
yeah.
But I don't solely blame them because the reality is that if your kid gets online and bullies someone, that's not social. Mark Zuckerberg didn't raise your kid. You
No,
did. And so
yeah,
if your
yeah,
kid's online bullying someone, sure, social media has problems, but your kid's a bully. And
yeah,
there's a problem separate from
yeah,
the internet, separate from social media, that I think a lot of parents excuse themselves from. They go,
yeah,
it's Facebook's fault that my kid is a bully.
yeah,
And it's like,
yeah.
no, it's your fault.
Yeah, you have to take responsibility.
Right.
But then it's also good, like now you do a podcast that you also as a parent like seek information, because like also for for the grown-ups it can be hard to know, like you say, it might have a negative effect and so on. I think, like you say, everything in life is a balance, but of course it's good to learn and get some education about like how can you then like inspire your kids in a good way. Like I talked about what we did in Nordic
Yes.
LA doing the online writing camps. Suddenly we had people on board that couldn't afford a ticket to LA, and they were part of writing big songs. So yeah,
Exactly. And
it
I
is a
love that. I love
dilemma.
that you say that because,
Yeah,
some of the questions I always ask when people come on the show, one of them is,
yeah,
like, um, who's basically responsible? Who's responsible
yeah,
for what's out there on social media? And
yeah.
I would say there's a good amount of people who come on and say the owners of social media are responsible.
Mm,
And to a degree, I can understand that, right? I can
yeah,
understand that perspective. But for me, just
yeah,
kind of the way I view things in life,
yeah,
I've always looked at and said,
mm,
how much is my responsibility?
yeah,
Not how much is it someone else's responsibility, but rather
mm, mm,
how much of this is on me? And am
yeah,
I can say all day long that social media is bad, but am I using it for good?
mm,
That's the question.
yeah. Of course.
Because then it's like, what's the
Yeah,
point of me saying it's bad while at the same
mm,
time, I don't do anything to fix it? I don't do
no,
anything to make it good. And so, like
mm,
you said, you turned around and you used Nordic LA to create an
mm,
opportunity to where
mm,
people could see that
yeah,
connecting online can have positive
yeah, yeah, yeah.
opportunity for others.
No, I totally agree. I think in terms of like what other people also saying to you, where is the responsibility? I think each individual is responsible for your actions. Like now, I've been living in LA for years. I've been spending a lot of time in the US. I love the US for many reasons. Something I find a little bit hard in general is that you sometimes take responsibility away from the individual, saying, okay, you walk into a
Yeah.
bar, there's like a rule set, you cannot like I'm like, no, why should I bring a fire extinguisher? Like why should I
Yeah.
do something bad here? Where let's say you go to a hotel, you fall over the balcony, and you're like, okay, I think I'll try to sue the hotel because maybe the rails should be higher or something like that. In
Right.
Denmark, it's very much about if you do something stupid, it's your fault. You cannot sue anyone. Like you have to
So
think.
I love that
And
comparison. So when you're talking about Denmark and US, right? You've got
yeah,
you've
yeah,
got some experience.
totally. Yeah.
What would you say? You kind of already led with it maybe, but
Mm.
the difference of social media in the
Yeah.
US and how
Yes.
people use it and look at it here versus social media in Denmark, because I know it's
Yeah.
there. I have tons
Yeah.
of people I
No,
know in
no.
Denmark. So
It's totally.
you think there's a cultural
Mm,
difference on how people
mm,
look at social media there
yeah.
versus here?
First of all, also to give the listeners an idea about Denmark. Denmark is a small country, less than 6 million people. We got
Very small.
a new king 2 days ago.
Congrats, maybe.
That's very romantic. No, no, he's a great guy,
Yeah.
and so on. Yeah, I know him very well, so he's a great guy.
I haven't
Um,
brushed up on my Denmark Kings in a while.
you know, but we just got a new king, and but that's been like since we were kids. We when we watched TV, it was subtitled with so we watched a lot of American TV and British TV, yeah, as well,
Hmm.
and also now there's a big influence, as you probably know that, and most of your listeners probably know that too. There's a big influence on our media in general from the US. We are following American politics. We are listening to American bands. We, even though you've never been to the US, right? We've been watching Friends. We've been watching Beverly Hills in the old. Like we have a pretty good idea. When I came to LA the first time, I was like, this is LA. I feel I know it. In a way.
Yeah, yeah.
So the influence is big, no doubt about that. So some of the trends that we see on social media is definitely following what you do in the US. Of course, then there's something like TikTok, and that's Chinese and so on, but still that's also used in the US. So of course, in general, we follow the same trends. We have influencers in Denmark as well. I think it's kind of in many way alike. I think maybe the difference in a bit is maybe more on a European level compared to an American level. That the EU, they have restrictions towards some of
Much,
the big
much bigger restrictions.
yeah,
Yes.
that you see in the US, and then meet something. I think personally, when it comes to when you talk about where's the responsibility, I think each individual person is responsible. But of course, I think the social media companies, as they do, I think they should take responsibility to people killing someone, hardcore porn, stuff like that should not be exposed to kids, for example. So of
Mm,
course they should take a responsibility. At the end of the day, it's your own responsibility. But as a kid, it can be hard to do that, and even as a parents to know exactly what's happening, right? So
right.
I think it's a combination. I just think, like you talk about, we cannot just say, okay, I have no responsibility. It's up to the social media companies. I mean, they provide a platform. We kind of provide. We make the content, you and me, and the
Yep.
influencers, and who's out there. So I would say for my own sake, also in terms of Nephew, my band, we've been together for 28 years. So we're kind of old school in many ways. We sold a lot of physical albums back in the days and so on. So we're a little bit more like old school when it comes to social media, but we still use it. We use it for, when we have a new album released, when we work in a partnership, we offer our fans something. Of course, it's part of everyone's life. And I think it's cool. I really enjoy it. But yes, could I be better at balancing that? I definitely could. I spend too much time on it. I don't have TikTok because I'm afraid of downloading it because I would love to sit around and look at videos, but
It reminds me of the war on drugs, where,
yeah,
in the US, the more that we rage war against drugs, the
mm,
worse the war gets. It's never gotten better. There's no
no,
evidence
mm,
that our governmental approach to dealing with
mm,
drug issues
mm,
has ever done anything other than backfire.
no,
And it's funny because with social media is that it is an addiction. In fact,
yeah,
recently
mm,
in the EU,
mm, mm,
um, they did a poll, and it was like 52% of all teens that were polled believed that they were addicted to social media.
yeah,
And so you have this really tough balance
mm,
because
mm,
you have
mm,
elected officials who are supposed to do the will of the people, and the
yeah,
will of the people says, "My kid's
mm,
addicted to social media, fix it."
yeah. Let's
Right?
ban it.
So
Yeah,
then you
yeah,
have countries like
mm,
EU who will put more work into that. They'll make more
yeah,
regulations, more rules, more laws. Then you have
yeah,
countries like the US who kind of just dance around it, but
mm,
but people get really upset when you start to take away what they believe to be their individual rights.
yeah,
And I
yeah,
wonder if we really see, because there's just not enough data right now to be collected,
mm,
but I
mm,
wonder what the difference would be when you have more regulation. Is it
mm,
actually helping or not? Are
yeah,
kids less suicidal and less depressed
yeah, yeah,
or not? We don't have that data
yeah.
yet, but I'd be
No,
very curious to see
yeah,
if either
yeah,
one is making a difference,
yeah.
less or more regulation, you
Mm,
know?
mm.
Like we saw with the war on
Yeah,
drugs, right? We
yeah,
overregulated and it didn't do
yeah.
anything.
No, no, and like you say, there's not a lot of data on that. I think again, it's about having the conversation with your kids, with your friends. Like when I talked about an ex-girlfriend, I mean, I could say, "Hey, don't it's important whatsoever." But of course, in the back of my head, I'm like, maybe she's right. Maybe
Maybe there should have
sometimes
been a conversation.
exactly. And sometimes it's hard to see yourself from the outside, right? You just I do what I do and so on. But sometimes it's good to be reminded that hey, Christian, we actually in a social situation here where we should have a conversation or
Yeah.
play chess or something. I'm
Right. I'm
actually
here
recently,
with you now, right?
yeah, recently I really got into the old school chess game, board game, and and I played chess yesterday with a friend, and that
Do
was
you
great. But
follow
after that,
pro chess at all?
I have friends that are very dedicated, so I'm trying not to go too
Okay.
crazy
I
in it.
love
But
I love following people like Magnus Carlsen.
yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah, he's a Norwegian guy, so
I
yeah,
mean,
yeah,
he is
he's something.
something
Yeah, yeah.
else, right?
No, I agree, and again, that's also like that's a hybrid. We play chess in real life, and then you can play like chess.com or some of these platforms where you can get better and you can train before you meet your friends. But now the example from yesterday, we played chess and then we played FIFA on PlayStation,
Yeah.
and for me, it's not like, oh, now I'm offline, now I'm online. But I like during the night that, we spend maybe 4 or 5 hours together with my best friend Peter. And I like we did, different things. Then we played some ping pong, but I think like you talked about earlier, the screen is integrated. It's just like, how do we balance it? And of course, it's interesting to think about the future, like what will happen when we get screens built into our eyes?
Mhm.
Will be crazy, or will that just be a layer like augmented reality stuff like that? But there's
Something
some we
interesting
yeah,
that I was researching last year, um, which wasn't long ago,
yeah,
um,
yeah, that's
was
correct.
was that there was a lot of things that have seen declines over the years, especially post COVID and things like that.
Yeah,
But one thing that has seen pretty impressive growth is conventions,
yeah, hmm,
conferences and conventions, and even some theme parks. And I
yeah,
think people are still looking for a personal
yeah,
connection, an
hmm,
in-person connection. But I think what
yeah,
we're seeing is they want it to mean something. So either
yeah,
they want to meet with someone who's important to them,
yeah, yeah,
or they want to
hmm,
go do something
yeah,
that is
yeah,
important to them. But we don't necessarily see, right? Movie theaters are struggling. They're still
yeah,
struggling, right? Even with big
hmm,
hits like
hmm, hmm,
Oppenheimer and Barbie,
yeah, yeah,
that
yes, yeah,
AMC stock is still down because the
yeah,
reality is that I think most
hmm,
people they don't really think that the
hmm,
movie sitting in a movie theater when they could be sitting at
yeah,
home is all that much better.
no,
I really don't
no,
see that. But
no,
those
mm,
same people might go spend even more money
yeah,
to go to a
yeah,
convention to
yeah, yeah,
go participate because now
yeah.
they have an activity that they can't replicate at home.
I agree, and I think like also what we do in my company in Denmark called Volcano.nu, we work a lot with building and supporting communities, and we do a lot of conferences. We work with the urban planning, how we use art, creativity, music to create better cities, like better, like more livable cities, and so on.
That's
and
awesome.
and for us, it is a combination. We have a team of techno anthropologists that work with unstructured data from social media, so we can say, okay, we want to design this new area in the city, and then we look into people's, like, what do people look at, what do they take pictures of, like in Instagram, and what do they tag, like how do they relate to
Oh,
places and so on.
yeah.
So we get all this unstructured data. There's still a lot of Facebook groups around, like streets or communities and so on.
Yeah.
So we can kind of harvest the data. So when we go out and meet these people in real life, we know a lot about them. We know what they eat, what they think, and so on. And of course, it sounds a little bit like, oh, we are surveilling them. No, we are
You're
only
just doing your
following.
research.
Yeah, we're following what they share with the world. We
We've
can only
all
look.
been in cities where we're like, this is a terribly planned city. It's awkward. I don't
Ex-
like it. It doesn't work for me.
yeah, and
Yeah.
people are lonely, and there's no fun place to go. So we really use the data to understand the city, but we always go out and have like a personal dialogue with the people. But we just have our research done, and then we even have an app called our walk app that we developed. So we say to people, okay, now you can share your data with us for a week. Please take pictures and photos of what you love, and then tag it, and then we can have different people, qualifying each other's photos. So it's not only one person that we talk to, because we people are very much like saying always, now I'm 48, I have this experience, and we tried it, it didn't work, and my friends are saying, but you like, what is the big perspective? And
Mm-hmm.
for me, technology is something that can give me the bigger perspective, but I still want the personal connection. Like, next time I come to the US, I want to meet you for a beer, because I really want to, I have no clue how high how tall
Yeah,
you
yeah,
are.
yeah.
So like in that urban planning phase, we use technology a lot, but we also use the physical aspect, because we can see when we do events, conferences, and so on, what is really ranking high in our evaluation is basically the one-to-one meeting, because we are social people, and yeah, we can get some online, and that's great, but we also need to go out there, and like when you talk about terrible planned cities, we have an issue in Denmark. A lot of the retail stores are kind of dying, because people, maybe they go out and look, but they go home and they buy online. That's the way it is.
Mm-hmm.
But we still need that kind of physical context somehow. You talked about conferences or conventions. Uh, I believe that our culture, like culture formats, that can be music, that can be cool restaurant concepts, that can be chess clubs. That's
Yeah.
something that create the value that we want to leave our houses and go out there and meet
I
each
think
other,
you're,
because we need that physical contact.
and I think that that retail remark is really good example of people want to have an entire connection. They
Mm.
want their physical and their digital
Yeah.
lives to intertwine. Now, people will
Yes.
claim they don't, but they do. They absolutely do.
Mm.
But
Yeah.
one of the big problems that retailers face is that um they're only in person. And then when you do online with
Yeah.
a lot of them, it's clunky
Mm.
and it's awkward and it doesn't feel right.
Yeah.
And so they'll go to somewhere familiar like Amazon,
Yeah.
or they'll
Yeah.
go to
Mm.
somewhere familiar who's made the
Mm.
process a lot
Mm.
easier on them
Yeah.
to get what they
Yeah.
want. Because,
Yeah.
I think one of the biggest things that retailers have to look at is they have to say, how do we create an in-person experience that translate to an online
Mm.
kind of execution or an online
Mm.
relationship
Mm.
to where they can walk into a store and they
Mm.
essentially can leave the store with a purchase as
Mm.
conveniently, as easy, as
Mm.
simplified as if they
Yeah.
were online. Because the reality is that
Mm.
it's actually
Mm.
usually a lot more work to buy in
Mm.
store. You have to wait in line. You have to have
Yeah.
the attitude of whoever's behind the desk. You have a
Yeah.
lot
And
of,
you have to start all over. Like when you shop online, if you use a platform you used before, they know a lot about you, meaning that they probably come up with some better offers. When you
yeah,
walk
they
into the store,
curate for you.
yeah, you start all over. When that's said, and that's also what I believe in retail, is that we're gonna see more and more formats that are offering more than just you can buy a product. They are offering you an experience, whatever that is. That can be, yeah, something social, something cultural, but that's the only way to survive, because people are not only or maybe they need a cup of coffee, right? It's hard to buy that online if it should be warm when it's arriving. But
Until we
but
have the
but
drones.
yeah, that's right.
We have
No, so yeah,
uh I don't remember if it was Starbucks. There's a company out in New Mexico that has
okay.
8,000 people on a list for their drone deliveries.
Oh, yeah. I mean, if it works, it works. I'm all in. I'm
But
all
I
in.
agree. You
Yeah,
have to connect
yeah,
them. And I think that's one
yeah,
of the most, you know, what's so funny is I love talking to you, by the way, because we agree a lot about community.
yeah,
That you just have to have a community around something for it to feel like it matters.
yeah.
And I think one of the biggest disappointments that a lot of people feel about Netflix is
Mm,
that it doesn't matter what they do on Netflix. They could
mm,
watch everything all day. They have no
mm,
one to share it with.
mm.
There's no one
Yeah,
to
yeah,
experience it with them. But here's the
yeah.
problem. We
Mm,
used to go to movie theaters for
mm,
community,
mm. Yeah,
but now we've become so antisocial
yeah.
that when we go to a movie theater, we try to have
Mm,
as much room apart from other people.
mm,
We might even
mm.
try to go at times where there would be less people,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
We're not
Mm,
there. But
mm,
I remember watching certain movies, Lord of the Rings. I remember
mm,
watching that in theaters and
mm.
Gandalf coming back and hearing people shout and go,
Mm,
"Oh,
yeah, yeah, like yeah.
Gandalf's back." There was community.
Yeah.
And we felt this kind of kindred spirit
Mm,
with each other,
mm.
strangers. And
Yeah,
that's missing from the streaming world,
yeah,
is that there
yeah,
is no community. And I think we have to
yeah,
figure out a way
yeah.
to blend. How
Yes.
do we make, and
Yeah.
one of the companies I'm
Yeah.
working on is actually designed to address this issue, but it's
Okay,
where it
cool.
creates this community and relationship. I'm working
Yeah.
with a bunch of influencers right now as well,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
listening to them say all of social media is designed for their fans to consume, but not to have a relationship.
Mm,
And even
mm,
for them, they're like, we
mm.
have to work so hard just to kind of make someone have a relationship with us, because
Yeah.
all of social media is designed to
Mm,
just consume, 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 because they need you
mm,
to watch ads. I don't know if you've been on YouTube lately, but now they've got
mm.
ads when you pause the video.
Yeah. Yeah.
You can't even
Mm,
finish a song
mm.
anymore without an
No.
ad, which is
No.
like, are you kidding me? You can't even
Mm,
give me
mm.
3 minutes without an
Yeah.
ad,
Yeah.
right?
No, no, no,
Go
but
ahead.
Robert, I totally follow you, and I agree. Like what they did in the gaming world in general, you're pretty connected, right? Like you say,
Oh, yes.
you probably play online and so on, and that's great. No, that's missing out on the streaming, no doubt about that. I think when it comes to community, I think it's very important that you and I and other people and everyone is working on making sure that we can stay connected, because for me, just to explain that shortly, is that if we lose connection, we lose understanding of people that are not exactly like ourselves. So we need to keep the dialogue. We need to meet online. We have to meet in the physical space somehow. How we have to design cities that are inclusive. We have to design online platforms that are inclusive. I believe in community, but of course, if let's say Mark Zuckerberg said that Facebook is a community for all, we would say, hey, come on, everyone can jump on it. So a community is also defined by, let's not call it rules, let's call it like principles or
Yeah.
guidelines in a way.
Yeah.
And the thing is, we don't have one community for all, but we should have different communities,
Micro
offline,
communities.
online, for
Yep.
older people, for younger people, for people that like chess. We talk about that. And then it's important to connect these different communities. And I do believe actually our like culture, like concerts, you said conferences, museums, festivals, that is where different communities come from different
Absolutely.
reasons, because they want to be together. They want to have that cheering
Well, and the
feeling
thing
when
is that
Gandalf is on
it's so
stage.
funny that in a world where we always talk about diversity in a very political way, the reality is that most of us are we're not looking at gender and color of skin most of the time. We're looking
Mm,
about what we have in common.
yeah,
And that's how we often will divide ourselves, is
yeah,
that, let's take gamers. Most of the
yeah,
time, gamers have no idea what the person on the other side believes in, looks like, feels like, nothing. What they know is we have something in common. We're trying to win the game. We're trying to
yeah, yeah.
accomplish something.
Mm,
We're trying to enjoy. And what's so crazy, my wife and I actually met on a video
Mm.
game. She
Cool.
lived in a totally different state, right?
Yeah, that's
And
cool.
but
That's
we had
amazing.
something in common. And I
Yeah,
really think some of the problems with social media, and I'd love to hear your thoughts, is that
yeah,
care less about what people have in common. It just wants you to consume. And
yeah,
and that's an issue because the thing is that you and I have to find things that we have in common with so we can have conversations. And then we'll
yeah.
get to see diversity because then I'm going to see where we differ in perspectives,
Mm,
where we have
mm.
opposing opinions.
Yeah, yeah.
But we
Mm,
can't lead with that. If I just come at you and say, Kristian, you're wrong
mm,
about everything, which is
mm.
how a lot of social media is being used,
Yeah, yeah.
then we go farther apart. But, I was
I
telling
agree.
my wife this the
Mm,
other day, is that we know way too much about each other. We
mm,
weren't meant to know all the things that we know
yeah.
on social
Mm,
media because
mm,
growing up, and I know you know this too,
mm,
you only knew what others showed you. And we think that knowing more helps us. But I think that
mm,
we all have thoughts that we shouldn't be
mm,
sharing. We all have
mm.
sides of
Of
us
course.
that
Mm,
need to stay private
mm.
and
Yeah.
not shown to the world. But we get on social media
Mm, mm,
and see, I don't know your political opinion. Now,
mm,
maybe one day I'm going to learn, but that's
mm,
not how we start our relationship. We start
mm.
our relationship
Yeah.
on common
Mm,
ground, love for
yeah.
music, sharing and
Yeah.
helping others.
Mm,
Now,
mm,
when we get to a political conversation, it's
mm,
going to go better because we have trust.
mm.
We have a
Yeah.
bit of familiarity.
Yeah, yeah. And Robert, what you're saying actually, and it's interesting about like now to talk specifically about politics, but that even though you have of different political opinions, you still listen to music probably, like most people do.
Yeah.
You still watch a movie, you still eat food, like, and let's say you have people from two different, really different parties, they meet up and they have to they have to make their own meal together. They will both have an interesting of that meal tasting good, no matter if they are
Yes.
Democrat or Republican or whatever. And that's something what we forget because yeah, they only meet on a political arena. But let's make some community dinners. Let's watch some shows. Like
Yes.
stuff like that. So that's also like again what we work with in Volcano is very much about saying culture, events, all this stuff, it's not only entertainment, it's actually what's driving us as people to come together. We have to come together in new communities. In terms of the future sustainability and so on, we have to work with like shared economy. By the way, technology is great for shared economy. We do a lot of like ride sharing and stuff like that in Denmark.
Yeah.
Also, you lease a car and then you can rent it to other people. All that technology is great. We have to share, like, instead of throwing food out, we should eat together and make sure that we reuse what's the leftovers and so on. That's something actually I learned in the US is that when you go to a restaurant and you don't finish up, you get a doggy bag and maybe you can give it to a homeless person or you can eat it later. We don't do that in Denmark, and that's a big difference. And I wish that we could start doing that in Denmark as well to save food. But anyway, building these communities, it's not only for the sake of entertainment and the icing on the cake. It's actually the fundament of our society. So yeah, and that should be technology, that should be physical events and so on. And best, like you say, that should be mixed together
Yeah,
because
because
we
it's so
are
interesting. And I caught
yeah.
myself about this too, right? Is
Mm,
that let's say that you and I didn't know each other, but maybe we were introduced
mm,
like through
yeah,
Dylan
yeah,
and
yeah,
and then we connected on social media. Now, normally when people are connected together, again, it's a common ground. So
yeah,
we start off on a
yeah,
positive note. We
yeah,
start off sharing something that we both appreciate and
yeah.
it builds a relationship. But way that we use social media now is we add someone on social media and
Mm,
immediately they're airing things that they probably should keep to themselves. They go,
mm.
I hate insert politician here. They're the worst
Yeah,
ever and
yeah,
you're terrible. Now,
yeah,
I like that politician. And so
yeah,
then I go, oh
yeah.
man,
You
this
like,
Kristian guy's a piece of crap and I don't like him, even though maybe
mm,
everywhere else in life we would have been friends and we
yeah,
would have agreed on things and we would have enjoyed each other's company. But
yeah,
because we're saying things and our way of building relationships is so backwards. That's why, again, I
mm,
think that video game communities work so well is because
mm,
they lead with something that they share in common,
mm,
right? they typically are working together to complete a
Yeah, yeah,
goal,
yeah,
right?
yes,
So
yeah,
but that doesn't happen in most of social media.
mm,
What are we trying to
mm,
accomplish when someone logs on to
yeah,
TikTok? What
yeah.
is the point?
Mm.
There's nothing there.
Mm. And I think like in terms of like what we should really be aware of is like there's probably done some research about that, been done some research about that, but like the satisfaction in getting likes or something like
Oh
that. That
yes.
but what
Yes.
is that? What is that
I actually
because
wrote about this recently, about
yeah,
um
yeah,
the reward high.
yeah, which is like of course that's fair. I mean like I'm not to judge anyone, but I think it's kind of sad if that's the only reward you get, right? So I think it should be combined with, just someone saying hi when you walk down to the grocery store or saying thanks for the help, like something like that. We people, we as a human, we need to be seen, like everyone has to be seen,
Right.
otherwise you lose a reason to be here, right? So I
Absolutely.
understand that. And I think the social media can sometimes help doing that, but I think it's a combination as we talked about earlier.
Right.
It's a
It's like
balance. Yeah.
what's your source? I'm happy to judge when it comes to
Mm,
social media. And I'll be the first one to
mm,
tell you, if likes and comments are where you get your validation from, there's a problem with
yeah.
that, right? I have no
Yeah.
problem with people seeking validation, right? I have no
No,
problem with
no.
people seeking rewards. Listen,
Yeah.
when someone clocks in to do their job, it's not
Mm,
because they were bored. It's because they want a
mm,
reward. They clock in
yeah.
and the
Yeah.
reward is
Yeah.
they get paid.
Yes.
Everything in life. I'm
Yeah.
not
Mm,
nice to my wife just because I'm a
mm,
nice person. It's because I
mm,
love her and I want to have a good
mm.
marriage and I
Yeah.
want something
Mm,
from it. I want a better
mm,
marriage than was yesterday. So I
yeah.
do things in hopes that the reward will
Mm,
be a stronger marriage. I take care of
yeah.
my children to teach them in the best way possible with
Mm,
the
mm,
reward of knowing that hopefully
mm.
they will do better in life, that they'll be
Of course.
okay. But
Yeah.
there is no actual reward for a like. It doesn't
No.
mean anything, right? It means how
No.
we treat our children. It means how I
Yeah.
treat my wife. But someone liking my video,
Yeah.
that's why you'll never get enough.
Yeah.
It'll
Yeah.
never be
Yeah.
enough. And so
You'll
I
always
think the
get more.
reward
Mm,
perspective is
mm,
not wrong, but what the
mm.
reward is
Yeah.
has to
Yeah.
shift. Our mindset
Yeah.
has to shift
Mm,
of
mm,
why are we doing what we're doing online and what are
mm.
we getting out of it? Not that we should
Yeah.
stop doing things online. No,
Mm,
no, I'm good with that, right? Again, let's
yeah.
go back to video games. It's a great example. There is
Mm,
a reward. You won something
mm.
together. You
Yeah.
achieved something together. That's why video games,
Mm,
you know
mm.
what's so crazy? You may not know this. So online or in-game spending,
Mhm.
which means you're buying stuff that means nothing to the outside world.
Yeah.
For
Yes.
anyone listening, in-game means you're
Mm.
buying digital skins and
Yeah.
guns and it
Yes.
means
Yeah.
nothing. It'll never help
Yeah.
you. You can't bring it to
No.
another game, right?
No.
It is more than triple what all of Target, the big retail store, it's more
Yeah.
than
Yeah.
triple how much Target makes in revenue.
Okay. Yeah.
So that tells you
Yeah.
something that
Yeah.
there is something happening in those communities that
Yeah.
make people feel that the reward is
Mm.
worth it
Yeah.
versus you see this decline on social media.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
I
crazy. It's
agree.
crazy
No,
to see.
no, I think it's an interesting perspective, and I think just like something that you and I, and also the listeners that are in a position where they can contribute to this mission, is actually to say, how do we again, how do we connect the on and offline world? Like, so the reward. Let's say that you could actually exchange likes to hugs or something like that. That actually something that meant something. I think that's missing, and I think like to challenge the social media companies. I would love to see more of that hybrid that actually,
I'm
putting some
gonna when
meaning.
we end this interview, I'm gonna
Yeah,
share a little bit about what we've
yeah.
built.
Okay, no,
I
that's
think you're gonna have
exciting.
a blast.
Yeah, yeah.
So I gotta
So,
ask you
so,
because I'm really
yeah,
curious.
yeah,
So volcano
yes,
and
yeah,
planning these communities. So it's
yes,
kind of a two-part question. One is,
yes, mm,
what is one of the best designed cities you've ever been to?
yes. Should I answer
Yeah, yeah.
that?
Tell me, what's one of the best cities you've ever
Mm,
been to that you're just like, I
yeah,
love
yeah,
this city, how they
yeah.
designed it, the layout, the feeling.
Yeah. First of all, to put a perspective, like also for the American listeners, probably a lot of them have been to Europe, maybe some haven't. So just to tell about like how is European cities in general designed compared to American cities, is that And a lot of the European cities, they started organically, where a lot of the American cities was actually planned from the beginning. So you have the streets, you have like it's kind of easy to navigate in a lot of American cities because from the beginning it was designed in these squares. So it's easy to say on this corner of these streets, where in Europe you have these old medieval cities that are like twisting and the roads you like I thought I walked this like in a
Yeah.
way. So when you ask me about the best, that's also depending on which eyes you're looking on best, because when it comes to efficiency, definitely coming to a new city in America, I can pretty easy navigate that pretty fast. I'm
I would
like,
agree.
okay, this
Yeah,
street,
yeah.
no, like New York, like Manhattan, this corner of this avenue and this street. Like when that's said, of course, for the more like emotional part, I think I get more inspired in a lot of European cities than American cities to be, and that's in general. I love LA, I love New York, I
It's
love
okay. You don't have to do
Seattle.
disclaimer. You're good.
No, now everyone hates me. I think like the unexpected sometimes. You meet that more in Europe. Some would call it inefficiency. Other would call it like, you're getting something you didn't expect to get somehow. For example, and to answer your question, and I know I'm biased, but I think actually Copenhagen is one of the best designed cities in the world. And why do I think that? First of all, we have bike lanes everywhere. We have bike highways. I have a car. Yes, I do have a car. That's when I go far in my everyday life. Even though in the snow now, I bike around. It's not that easy, but I do use my bike every day.
Wow.
And most Copenhageners, they are biking. Even though it's not about how much money you have or whatever. Where I live, I can basically get anywhere in the city in 20 minutes. Like I can be anywhere.
Wow, that's
So
very
so
interesting.
so the fact, and that's good for health, that's good for pollution, that's good for a lot of things,
For a lot
that
of
this
things,
is
absolutely.
for a lot of things, and also for community, because you sometimes you meet someone on your bike and you have a conversation. You don't have that in your car, right? Because
Mhm.
you're in a
You're more
bubble.
likely to have road rage in your car, to be yelling at them for cutting you off or
Yeah, and then
driving
you
too
yell.
slow.
Yeah, here's like suddenly you stop and you're next to one. You're like, okay, how are
Hey,
you?
how's it
Like
going? Yeah,
conversations and so on. Yeah.
yeah.
So plus Copenhagen, we have a lot of a lot of water around the city, like this harbor, and they clean the water is completely clean, so you can basically go in the middle of the city and then take a swim. You know, that's kind of special.
Wow, that's so surprising. It reminds me of old San Francisco,
Yeah,
that
yeah,
had the river running through, and you could go to down to the river, and there would be
yes,
people just socializing
yes,
and
yes,
enjoying their day
yeah.
together.
And the thing also, like with Copenhagen, also compared to LA, is that you have these cold winters and you have warmer summers. So when the spring is coming, everyone is coming out of the houses and hang out in the streets, and it's bright in the evening until midnight, and so on. And that the city reflects that. I think like the livability and life quality is very high in Copenhagen and in Denmark. Of course, we're also living in a society, we pay a lot of tax, but healthcare is free, education is free. Even when I started in university, they paid me a salary every month to study. That's very different from the US. And that also affects our city, meaning that we have a big middle class and a very small upper class and a small lower class, meaning that most people can afford to buy a good bike. Most people can afford to take the metro. We have a build out metro system now, a self-running metro. Talking about technology, kids
Yeah,
loves it because they play that they're steering the metro when they sit in the front and so on. That
that's
goes
funny.
all night. So the connectivity is big, and
Well, I
we
think
know
that's
that from
cool
this.
about the world too, is that the problem is that so many countries want to be like other countries. And it's
Mm,
like lean into what you're good at and what you
mm,
have available, and be the best version of you can be. Because there's
mm.
going to be people who look at Denmark and say, that's home. I get that,
Yeah,
and I
yeah.
want to go
Mm,
there. And then there's
mm,
going to people who say,
yeah,
no way, I don't want Denmark. I want the Philippines. I want,
yeah, yeah.
I know guys who are in
Mm,
America who moved to the Philippines, and that's home for them. And
yeah,
and yet,
yeah,
if you
yeah.
talk to the average
Mm,
Filipino, the dream is to
mm,
come to
mm.
America.
Yes.
And so that's
Yeah.
beautiful though,
Mm,
because we don't want
mm.
every world to look like Denmark and every
Like the
country to look
same.
like the
No,
US. We
no,
want
no.
Denmark to
Yeah.
have, if they want to
Mm,
have high taxes,
yeah.
fine. If that's what
Yeah,
the
yeah.
people want,
Yeah.
that's
Yes.
okay.
And I agree. And but the thing, like, I think when it comes to like the whole health aspect, like definitely that's something that other cities can learn from from Denmark. For example, I don't know if you know that, but Times Square in New York, as you know it today, that's designed by a Danish person. His name
No
is
way.
Jan Gehl. Jan Gehl is an architect, and he's the one that basically invented bike lanes. So back in the
That's
days,
so
Times
cool.
Square was a lot of cars and was hard to actually walk there. Today, it's a place you walk. You know,
Yeah,
you walk there
you'd be an
as a
idiot to
tourist.
drive through it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So of course we can learn something from each other. And what I like about, like, now I talked about Copenhagen as one of my favorite cities, and that's also why I moved back here. I would also say coming back to LA, which was my second home for many years. I mean, I love the sun, I love the palms. I don't love the traffic. When that's said, at night, you know, you can really get far really quick because you have basically highways through the city. When you learn to navigate LA, you know, and as long as you don't have to commute for 7 hours a day, that's really hard for people, of course. There's a lot of lovely things about LA. I think the way that surprised me in the beginning in LA was that you could pass a place in the evening and it was dark and quiet. And for a European, you would think they're closed. Because in Europe, if you have a lively place, you would have a sign and you know the door would be open and so on. And then in LA, you walk in and there's 200 people having dinner and having a great time. So LA is much more destination based than Copenhagen. It's hard to just
Definitely.
take a
And I think
stroll
that's
in LA
most of the
and
US, right? Like you
yeah,
said, they were
yeah,
planned with
yeah,
business in mind. They were planned
yes,
to you
yeah, yeah,
go from point A to point B
yeah,
as
yeah,
quickly as
yeah,
efficiently as
yes,
possible.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And but and again, then what's really changed LA for me, also technology wise, was when you know the rideshare service came, like Uber and Lyft and Sidecar
Yeah.
and all these, because suddenly I could go to one part of the city, have a drink with my friends, and I could go somewhere else, and you know that's made me much more connected in the city.
Like you said,
So
accessible, made it much more accessible to you.
accessible, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And again, like maybe I think, as I said before, Copenhagen is one of the best designed cities, so to speak. Again, the beginning there was no design, you know, there was just some houses, and then you're like, we have to keep the enemy out, so they made like this artificial lakes, and you know, and today is like the cool place, like
Yeah.
so.
It's
There's
funny
also a
how
lot of
that works.
there's a lot of coincidence in it, right? Where the American cities in general were more planned. Uh, for me, I love both, but for different reasons. Like you also said, I like the diversity in the way we live also. When that's said, of course, due to health, for example, it's great that everyone is motivated to take the bike in Denmark because less
Yeah.
traffic, less pollution, stuff like that. So definitely, so to answer your question, there's a long answer. I think Copenhagen is definitely recommend the listeners if they go to Europe to visit Copenhagen.
Well,
Um,
you've convinced
and
me.
and but would also say visit during our summertime from May to September because it's just more lovely here. The winter is like rough and dark.
I believe
So
it.
now you know that.
Yeah.
That's my disclaimer. Yeah, but you of course. I mean, if any of you come to Copenhagen during the winter, you're welcome to reach out and come by for a beer. We have a great indoor life during the winter time, but the summers are the best.
Man, I loved it. Wow. Christian, this was a blast. I got to bring you on again because I
Yeah,
very much
totally.
enjoy talking to you. It's really awesome to just hear your different perspective.
Yeah,
You have such a
thank you.
positive outlook as well, which I appreciate.
Thank
Um,
you.
because I just think that having these conversations, just talking
Mm,
about, hey, what does the world look like? What do we like about it? What do we want to change about
mm.
it?
Yeah,
And like you said, some diversity in
yeah,
opinions and
yeah,
perspectives. I think it's
yeah.
really awesome, and it's just really
Mm,
enjoyable
mm.
to be able to share that with you.
Thank you. I agree, and I think also like also what we talk about is what should we be aware of? Like we should have a critical sense in what we do. We should not only just say it's all their fault. I mean, you're responsible as an individual, but of
Yeah.
course we should have a dialogue about this. Otherwise, we'll miss the train, so to speak. And I love technology. I love that people things are evolving, and you know I'm excited about the future. But let's talk about it, and that's what we did today. And I really appreciate that you invited me in, and I would love to come back, yeah, sometime.
Man, it was a blast. Seriously.